To my daughter Tessa Caroline Brennan, I leave the family home on West End Avenue and the entirety of my estate." The words hung in the air of the law office. Heavy. Final. Marcus Webb, the estate attorney, set the document down on the mahogany table. He didn't look up. He gave the silence room to work. Across from me, Heidi stopped breathing. My stepsister, the woman who had spent 30 years perfecting the art of the condescending smile, didn't scream. She didn't lunge across the table. She just deflated. The color drained from her face like dirty water spiraling down a drain. Her hand, the one with the 2-carat diamond ring, slipped off the armrest and hung limp at her side. "Greta." My stepmother made a sound, a sharp, strangled inhale. "That's not the right will," she whispered. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for a way out, looking for a manager to speak to, looking for anyone who would listen to her version of reality. Ray signed a new one. He promised. My father sat in his wheelchair at the head of the table. He looked small. The stroke had taken the strength from his left side, but his eyes were clear. He looked at Greta, then at Heidi, and finally at me. I didn't smile. I didn't feel the rush of victory I'd imagined 1,000 times in the shower. I just felt tired, a bone-deep exhaustion that had been accumulating for 3 decades. I sank back into the leather chair and let my head rest against the cool backing. It was over. The lies, the secrets, the desperate clawing for a place at a table that had been mine all along. Ray reached out his hand, shaking, and covered mine. "I never signed the new one, Greta," he said. His voice was a rasp, but the words were granite. "I couldn't." Heidi turned to look at me then. Her eyes were wide, terrified, like a child who realizes the lights have gone out and she's all alone. I held her gaze. I didn't blink. 8 months earlier, I stood alone in an empty auditorium holding an envelope that would burn my life to the ground. The air conditioning in the Vanderbilt auditorium hummed a low mechanical drone that tried to drown out the silence. It failed. The ceremony had ended 40 minutes ago. The other graduates were gone, spilled out onto the lawn into the humid Nashville afternoon, surrounded by parents holding bouquets of roses and dads adjusting cameras. I could hear them through the open double doors. Laughter, the pop of a champagne cork. Someone shouting, "We're so proud of you." I sat in row G, seat 14. My fingers traced the gold lettering on the leather tube in my lap. Master of Landscape Architecture. To my left, 6 empty chairs. I'd saved them. I'd put little reserved signs on them with blue tape. I pulled the tape off the chair nearest to me, balled it up, shoved it into the pocket of my gown. They weren't coming. I knew that at 10 o'clock. I knew it at 11. But some stupid, stubborn part of me, the 5-year-old girl who still waited by the window, had hoped until the dean called my name. Business emergency. Heidi had texted at 8 o'clock a.m. grand opening issues. Dad and Mom have to be here for support. You understand. I understood. The furniture store. Heidi's baby. Dad had poured $200,000 into that store last month. He couldn't spare 2 hours for my graduation. I stood up, my knees stiff. The gown felt heavy like a costume for a play that had already been canceled. I needed to get out of here. Needed to go home, order takeout, and pretend this day was just a Tuesday. I uncapped the tube to slide my diploma inside. It wasn't empty. There was already something in there. A white envelope, legal size, folded lengthwise to fit into the cylinder. No return address. Just my name, Tessa, handwritten in black ink. The script was jagged, hurried. I frowned, pulled it out. The paper felt thick, expensive. I looked around the empty hall. A janitor was sweeping confetti in the back, his headphones on. No one else. I tore the flap open. 2 documents slid out. The header at the top was familiar. I'd seen the commercials. Ancestry Verify. Genetic testing. The first page had my name on it. Subject, A. Tessa Brennan. Subject B. Raymond Brennan. My eyes scanned down to the bottom, skipping the scientific jargon. Relationship probability, 99.9%. Conclusion, parent/child. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Okay. Weird. Why would someone send me this? I knew Ray was my father. Everyone knew that. I had his nose, his tendency to grind his teeth when he was thinking. I flipped to the second page. Subject A, Heidi Brennan Cole. Subject B, Greta Brennan. My brain stuttered. I reread the names. Heidi and Greta, mother and daughter. The inseparable duo. The two women who looked at me like I was a stain on their silk carpet. I looked at the bottom of the page. Relationship probability, 0.0%. Conclusion, no genetic relationship detected. The paper rattled in my hands. The air in the auditorium seemed to vanish. I read it again. No genetic relationship? That wasn't possible. Heidi was Greta's replica. They had the same mannerisms, the same way of tilting their heads when they judged you. Greta talked constantly about her pregnancy with Heidi, about the labor, about how it was the greatest day of her life. There was a yellow sticky note attached to the back of the second page, sent to Marcus Webb per your request, file 8942. The handwriting on the note was different. Loopy, confident. It was Heidi's handwriting. My phone buzzed against the metal chair. A short, angry vibration. Then again, and again. I picked it up. The screen lit up the dim space between the seats. 72 missed calls, 40 from Heidi, 20 from Greta, 12 from Dad, and a stream of text messages that were still scrolling in one after another. Heidi, do not open the email. Heidi, Tessa, pick up the phone. Greta, it was a mistake. Delete it. Don't read it. Heidi, Dad is in the hospital. If you do anything to upset him right now, I swear to God. My thumb hovered over the screen. The pieces clicked together sharp and jagged. Heidi had run the test. She'd run it to prove I wasn't Ray's daughter. She wanted to cut me out. She wanted the proof to hand to the lawyers to make sure when Dad's heart finally gave out I wouldn't get a dime. But she hadn't looked at her own results first. Or maybe she had and she'd mixed up the files. She'd sent the wrong PDF to the lawyer, and somehow in her panic she'd copied me. Or the lab had sent hard copies. The phone buzzed again in my hand. Long, persistent. It wasn't Heidi this time. The name on the screen made my stomach drop to the floor. Marcus Webb, estate attorney. I stared at the name on the screen. Marcus Webb. My thumb hovered over the green button. The phone felt hot in my palm, baking in the trapped heat of the car. Outside, a family walked by the father carrying a bouquet of balloons that bobbed in the humid air. They looked happy. They looked normal. I slid my thumb across the screen. Ms. Brennan. His voice was deep, gravelly, the kind of voice that billed by the minute. I didn't ask how he got my number. I asked the only thing that mattered. Is it real? There was a pause. I could hear the rustle of papers on his end. I received an email this morning from Mrs. Heidi Cole, he said. The subject line was Estate Contest Strategy. Attached were 2 PDF files from a genetic testing lab. The body of the email instructed me to begin drafting a motion to challenge your standing as a lineal descendant based on the attached evidence. The air in my car seemed to thin out. I couldn't get enough of it into my lungs. She was trying to disinherit me. She wasn't just being mean, she was trying to erase me. However, Marcus continued, his tone shifting, becoming sharper. It appears Mrs. Cole made a significant error in her attachment selection. She intended to send only your file. She inadvertently attached her own as well, and she copied you on the correspondence. Heidi, my perfectionist control-freak stepsister who color-coded her spice rack and planned her vacations in Excel spreadsheets, had clicked the wrong button. Does my father know I asked? I was obligated to notify all parties involved in the estate planning, he said. I called your father 20 minutes ago. My stomach turned over. Ms. Brennan, you need to get to Vanderbilt Medical Center. Your father collapsed shortly after our call. The drive to the hospital was a blur of red brake lights and construction barrels. I didn't remember parking the car. I didn't remember walking through the sliding glass doors of the emergency entrance. I only came back to myself when I saw them. They were a wall. Heidi and Greta stood directly in front of the double doors leading to the cardiac care unit. They looked like they had been waiting for me. Heidi was still wearing her cream-colored suit from the store opening, though now it looked wrinkled, a coffee stain blooming on the lapel. When she saw me, she didn't look guilty. She looked like a cornered animal. You, she hissed. She took a step toward me, her index finger jabbing the air. You did this. You gave him a heart attack. I stopped 5 feet away from them. My hands were shaking, so I shoved them into the pockets of my graduation gown, which I was still wearing. It felt ridiculous now. A costume from a play that had been canceled. Get out of my way, Heidi. You have no right to be here, she said, her voice rising. The nurse at the station looked up. After what you did? Stressing him out like that? I laughed. It was a dry, ugly sound. I didn't send the email, Heidi. I didn't sneak around stealing DNA samples. Her face flushed a deep, blotchy red. Tessa, Greta said. My stepmother stepped forward. She put a hand on Heidi's arm, a restraining gesture, but her eyes were fixed on me. She used that soft, breathy voice she reserved for church socials and funeral receiving lines. The voice that meant, shut up and smile. Tessa, honey, let's lower our voices. People are looking. I don't care, I said. Is he alive? He's stable, Greta said. She moved closer, invading my space with the scent of lilies and expensive powder. Listen to me. We are a family. Families have disagreements. Families have misunderstandings. But we fix them in private. She reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. I jerked my head back. Greta's hand froze in midair. She lowered it slowly. Heidi made a mistake, Greta said, her voice dropping to a whisper. A terrible, foolish mistake. She was insecure. You know how she gets. She thought Ray was favoring you and she panicked. I looked at Heidi. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the linoleum floor, her jaw working. It doesn't matter what the test says, Greta continued. We can fix this. We can make sure you are taken care of. Taken care of, like a pet, like a problem to be managed. What does that mean? I asked. It means, Heidi snapped, looking up, that if you keep your mouth shut about the other file, we will make sure Dad includes you in the will. We won't contest it. You'll get a share. I stared at them. The audacity of it took my breath away. They were offering to bribe me with my own father's money. They were negotiating my birthright in a hospital hallway. And then I realized what they were really afraid of. It wasn't just the money. It was the other thing, the thing on page 2. No genetic relationship detected. Heidi wasn't Greta's biological daughter. That was the secret that had turned their faces pale. That was the leverage. I pushed past them. Heidi grabbed my arm, her nails digging into the fabric of my gown. You can't go in there, she shrieked. I ripped my arm free. Watch me. I pushed through the double doors. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of the monitors. The rhythm of the heart rate machine was fast, a little erratic, but steady. Ray Brennan looked small in the hospital bed. He had always been a big man, broad-shouldered, a man who filled a room with his voice. Now the sheets seemed to swallow him. His skin was the color of old parchment. I walked to the side of the bed. Daddy! His eyes fluttered open. They were cloudy, drugged, but when they found my face, they focused. Tessa! He croaked. I took his hand. It was cold. I'm here, Dad. I'm sorry, he whispered. A tear leaked from the corner of his eye and tracked into his silver hairline. I'm so sorry. It's okay, I said automatically. It was the role I had played for 30 years. The peacemaker. The one who smoothed things over so Ray wouldn't have to be uncomfortable. No, he said. He squeezed my hand, a weak, fluttering pressure. It's not okay. I knew. I froze. You knew about the will, he said. He took a shallow breath. Greta, she kept bringing me the new papers, every week, for years. She wanted me to sign them. She said it was only fair to Heidi. She said you had your own career, that Heidi needed the help more. Anger flared in my chest, hot and bright. And you listened to her? I listened, he said, but I never signed it. The machine beeped louder for a second as his heart rate spiked. I stroked his hand, trying to calm him. I never signed it, Tessa, he said again, his voice fierce. The only valid will is the one in the safety deposit box, the one from 1989. 1989. I was 1 year old. Everything goes to you, he whispered. It always has. The door behind me banged open. Heidi marched in her heels, clicking aggressively on the tile. Greta followed, closing the door softly behind her, sealing us in. Ray. Greta said, her voice high and tight. You need to rest. Tessa was just leaving. I stood up, but I didn't let go of his hand. I'm not going anywhere. Heidi stood at the foot of the bed. She looked at Ray, then at me. Her eyes were hard, flat stones. "We've made Tessa an offer, Dad," Heidi said, "to keep the peace." Ray looked at her. He looked tired. So incredibly tired. Heidi continued, "Since we're all confused about the testing errors, we think it's best if we just agree to seal those results, destroy them. In exchange, we agree not to contest your estate plan. Whatever you decide to give Tessa is fine." She was lying to him. She was acting like she had leverage, acting like she hadn't just been exposed as a fraud. I looked at Ray. "Tell them, Dad. Tell them about the will." Ray looked at Greta. Greta's lower lip trembled. She looked like a woman on the edge of a cliff. "Ray, honey," she said. "Please. My heart can't take this. If this gets out, the scandal." She was playing the victim. She was doing exactly what she had done for 20 years. And I watched in real time as my father crumbled. He closed his eyes. He turned his head away from me into the pillow. He didn't say a word. He wasn't going to save me. He wasn't going to tell them to get out. He was going to choose the path of least resistance just like he always did. He was going to let them devour me to keep his own peace. I let go of his hand. It fell onto the mattress with a soft thud. Tessa, Heidi said, her voice dripping with false reason. "Be smart. Sign the NDA. We have a draft right here. If you don't, I will sue you for intentional infliction of emotional distress. I will say you harassed a dying man. I have the money to drag this out for 10 years. Do you?" I looked at Heidi. Really looked at her. I saw the fear behind the arrogance. I saw the woman who had just found out she wasn't who she thought she was. And I saw my father turning his back on me. "No," I said. Heidi blinked. "What?" I said, "No. I'm not signing anything." I walked to the door. "You'll regret this," Heidi shouted. Her voice cracked. "You'll end up with nothing." I didn't look back. I walked out of the room, down the long corridor, past the nurses' station, past the waiting families. I walked out into the parking lot. The sun had set, leaving the sky a bruised purple. I sat in my car and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't get the key into the ignition. I needed help. I needed someone who knew the truth. Not just about the will, but about them. About Greta. I scrolled through my phone until I found the contact. Aunt June, my mother's sister. The only person who had kept Caroline's memory alive when Greta tried to scrub it from the house. I pressed call. It rang once, twice. "Hello?" Her voice was warm, smelling of cinnamon and old books. "Aunt June," I said. My voice broke. "I need to see you." "Tessa. What's wrong?" "I know about the DNA test," I said. "And I think you were right about Greta. About everything." There was a long silence on the other end. "Come home, honey," June said softly. "I have something of your mother's. Something I should have given you a long time ago." The drive to Knoxville took 3 hours of white-knuckle gripping on the steering wheel. I didn't turn on the radio. The silence in the car was thick, filled only with the hum of the tires on the asphalt, and the replay of my father turning his face away from me. I pulled into Aunt June's driveway just as the sun was starting to bleed gray light over the Smoky Mountains. Her house was a small brick bungalow with a porch that wrapped around the side covered in wisteria vines that looked like tangled shadows in the pre-dawn gloom. The porch light flicked on before I even cut the engine. June was standing at the screen door. She was wearing a quilted robe and fuzzy slippers, her gray hair loose around her shoulders. She didn't wait for me to knock. She pushed the door open and stepped out into the morning chill. I got out of the car. My legs felt like lead. I had walked out of the hospital on adrenaline, but now, 3 hours later, the crash was hitting me. "Aunt June," I said. She didn't speak. She just opened her arms. I walked into them and let go. I buried my face in her shoulder, smelling the familiar scent of lavender laundry detergent and stale cigarette smoke. She held me tight, rocking me slightly the way she used to when I was 6 years old and scraped my knee. But this wasn't a scraped knee. They know, I mumbled into her robe. They know I know. "Hush now," she said, her hand stroking the back of my head. "Come inside. I have coffee." The kitchen was exactly as I remembered it. Cluttered, warm, and yellow. Ceramic roosters lined the top of the cabinets. A stack of graded history papers sat on the round oak table next to a sugar bowl. It was the opposite of the pristine gray and white mausoleum Greta had turned my father's house into. June poured 2 mugs of black coffee and set a plate of store-bought cookies between us. She sat down, pulling her robe tighter around herself. "Tell me," she said. I told her everything. The envelope in the diploma tube, the 0% match, the ambush at the hospital, Ray's confession about the 1989 will, and his silence when it mattered. June listened without interrupting. She picked up a cookie and turned it over and over in her hands, crumbling the edge. When I finished, she didn't look surprised. She looked vindicated. "I always knew," she said quietly. "You knew Heidi wasn't Greta's." I suspected, she corrected. I suspected everything about that woman was a lie from the moment she walked into the hospital room. She took a sip of coffee. Her eyes, the same shade of hazel as my mother's, went distant. "Your mother Caroline was in that hospital for 3 days after the crash, Tessa. She was conscious for the first 2. Greta was her nurse." I froze. My coffee cup hovered halfway to my mouth. Greta was Mom's nurse. June nodded. She was attentive. Too attentive. She was always there, brushing Ray's hair off his forehead, bringing him extra blankets, whispering to him while he cried. She was positioning herself, a vulture in scrubs. I set the cup down. The ceramic clicked loud against the wood. "Caroline saw it," June said. "She grabbed my hand the day before she died. She couldn't speak much, her lungs were bad. But she wrote it down. She scribbled a note on a napkin. Watch the nurse." A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "Ray married her 6 months later," June said bitterly. "He was broken. He needed someone to tell him how to breathe. Greta was happy to do it. And then, 3 years later, she shows up with a 10-year-old daughter she claimed she had been hiding from an abusive ex-husband." "Heidi," I whispered. June nodded. "But here is the thing that never sat right with me. Greta played the martyr. She told everyone who would listen that she couldn't give Ray children because of a terrible car accident she had in her 20s. She said it destroyed her insides. She used it to make Ray feel guilty, to make him bond with Heidi because Heidi was the miracle child, the only one Greta would ever have." I leaned forward. "And you don't believe her, I have a friend," June said. "Ellen Park. She's a retired OB-GYN. She knew Greta back then. Before Ray. Before Nashville." And June looked me dead in the eye. "There was no accident, Tessa. Ellen mentioned it once years ago at a bridge game. She said Greta had her tubes tied voluntarily in 1984, 2 years before she married her first husband, 2 years before Heidi was born." The math clicked in my head like a deadbolt sliding home. "If she had her tubes tied in 84, I said slowly, she couldn't have given birth to Heidi in 86. "Exactly," June said. "So where did Heidi come from?" I looked out the kitchen window. The sun was fully up now, illuminating the overgrown garden. A cardinal landed on the feeder. "Heidi isn't just unrelated to Greta," I said. "She's a prop. Greta needed a child to secure her first marriage, or maybe to hook my dad. She brought Heidi in like a piece of furniture." June reached across the table and covered my hand. Her skin was papery and dry. "Caroline left things, Tessa," she said. "Letters, diaries. I kept them all in a box in the attic. I didn't give them to you because Ray asked me not to. He said it would upset the new family dynamic." She squeezed my hand hard. "Screw the dynamic," she said. 2 days later, I sat in the leather chair across from Marcus Webb. His office in downtown Nashville smelled of lemon polish and old money. Marcus looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes, but his suit was pressed sharp enough to cut glass. He slid a file folder across the desk toward me. "I've reviewed the submission from the lab," he said. "It holds up. The chain of custody is clear. Unless Mrs. Cole can prove the sample was tampered with, which is difficult, given she sent it herself, this is admissible." "What about the will I asked?" Marcus leaned back, steepling his fingers. "That is the stronger position. I went into the archives. Your father's original will, drafted in 1989, is still on file with our firm. It was never formally revoked. We have no record of a newer executed document." He paused, looking at me over his glasses. However, Mrs. Cole and her mother are not going to let this go to probate quietly. They have threatened a lawsuit for undue influence, but their real move will be guardianship. Guardianship, I repeated. If they can prove your father is mentally incapacitated, Marcus explained, the court will appoint a conservator, usually the spouse. If Greta gets conservatorship, she controls his assets while he is alive. She can drain the accounts. She can transfer titles. By the time Ray passes, there might be nothing left in the estate to inherit. My hands clenched in my lap. They would pick his bones clean before he was even cold. How do we stop them? We have to prove 2 things. Marcus said, first, that Ray is cogent. Second, that Greta and Heidi are acting in bad faith, that they are not protecting him, but predatory. He tapped the file on the desk. The DNA test helps. It proves Heidi has a motive to secure assets before her lack of biological relation is exposed. But we need more. We need to prove a pattern of deception. I thought about June's kitchen. I thought about the sterilization story. Marcus, I said, is it legal to record a conversation in Tennessee without the other person knowing? Marcus allowed a very small, very sharp smile to touch his lips. Tennessee is a one-party consent state, Tessa. As long as you are a participant in the conversation, you can record it. You don't have to tell them a thing. I nodded. I stood up and picked up the file. I'm going to need a copy of that 1989 will, I said, and I need you to look into something else for me. Anything. Find out where Heidi Cole was really born. My apartment in Nashville was quiet. It was a converted loft in an old factory building full of exposed brick and large windows that let in too much light. Usually I loved it. Tonight it felt like a bunker. I had spent the last 6 hours on my laptop drowning in public records databases. I had a subscription to 3 different genealogy sites and a pot of coffee that was turning into sludge. I started with the lie. Greta claimed Heidi was born in Memphis at Baptist Memorial Hospital on June 14, 1986. That was the story. That was the birthday we celebrated every year with ice cream cake. I searched the Shelby County birth index for that date. Cole Heidi. Nothing. I widened the search. Maybe she was born under a different name. Maybe Greta hadn't married David Cole yet. I searched for Greta Mueller, her maiden name. Nothing. I searched for any child born to a mother named Greta in June of 1986 in Shelby County. 0 results. I sat back, rubbing my eyes. The screen glare was giving me a headache. June was right. Greta didn't give birth in Memphis. I pulled up the digitized archives of the Memphis Commercial Appeal. I typed in Greta's name. Dozens of hits. Mostly social notices. Greta Mueller attends charity luncheon. Greta Cole hosts garden party. I narrowed the date range to 1986. I found it. A small blurb in the Society column dated June 16, 1986, 2 days after Heidi was supposedly born. Mrs. Greta Cole was seen enjoying the summer solstice gala at the Peabody Hotel, looking radiant in emerald silk. I zoomed in on the grainy scan. It was just text, no photo, but the date was undeniable. If Greta had given birth 2 days prior, she wouldn't be at a gala looking radiant in silk. She would be in a hospital bed or at home nursing a newborn. She wasn't pregnant, I whispered to the empty room. She never was. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from a number I didn't have saved, but I knew who it was. We need to talk. Just us. No lawyers. Coffee shop on 12th. Tomorrow at 9. It was Heidi. I looked at the screen. I thought about the one-party consent law. I thought about the fear in her eyes at the law office in the future and the arrogance in her text messages in the past. She wanted to talk. She probably wanted to threaten me or bribe me again. She didn't know I knew she was a ghost in the system. She didn't know I knew she didn't exist. I picked up the phone. I'll be there, I typed. Then I opened the voice memo app on my phone and tested the sensitivity. I placed it in my purse, the microphone facing out. I spoke clearly into the bag. Testing. 1, 2, 3. I'm coming for you, Heidi. I played it back. It was crystal clear. The next morning, I arrived at the Frothy Monkey on 12th Avenue 15 minutes early. It was a trendy spot in Nashville, the kind of place with exposed Edison bulbs and baristas who looked like they played in indie bands. The air smelled of roasted beans and expensive cologne. I chose a table in the back corner away from the espresso machine's hiss. I ordered a black coffee, placed my purse on the table with the microphone facing out, and hit record on my phone app. Then I waited. Heidi walked in at 9 sharp. She was wearing sunglasses big enough to cover half her face and a scarf that probably cost more than my first car. She scanned the room, spotted me, and frowned. She didn't buy a coffee. She marched straight to my table and sat down without taking off her glasses. "You look tired," she said. It was classic Heidi. Start with a dig disguised as concern. I slept fine. I lied. "What do you want, Heidi?" She sighed, pulling a sleek leather folder from her oversized tote bag. She slid it across the table. "I want to end this, Tessa. For Dad's sake." I didn't touch the folder. "What is it?" "It's an agreement," she said. "A settlement. We know the DNA test was upsetting. It was a misunderstanding. The lab made a mistake with the labels." I almost laughed. A mistake. And to make up for the stress, she continued smoothing her hair. "Mom and I want to offer you a gift. $50,000. Tax-free. All you have to do is sign this waiver stating you won't pursue any further claims against the estate or discuss family medical history publicly." $50,000. It was a lot of money. It could pay off my student loans. It could fix the roof on my apartment building. But it was hush money. "And what about the will?" I asked. "The one from 1989, Heidi waved a manicured hand. "Oh, that old thing. It's invalid Tessa. Dad wrote that before he even met Mom. It doesn't reflect his current wishes. We're petitioning the court to recognize his intent to provide for his current family." "His intent," I repeated. "Or your intent." She leaned forward, lowering her glasses. Her eyes were cold, hard flint. "Don't be stupid," she hissed. "Dad is dying, Tessa. His heart is operating at 30% capacity. Do you really want his last days to be filled with lawyers and subpoenas if he dies from the stress of this? That blood is on your hands." There it was, the threat. I leaned back, crossing my arms. I felt the phone in my purse humming with the recording. "You're scared, Heidi. Excuse me. You're scared because you know that will is valid. And you're scared because of what that test really showed. It didn't just show I was Ray's daughter. It showed you aren't Greta's." Her face went blank. For a second, just a second, the mask slipped and I saw genuine terror. Then it was gone, replaced by a sneer. "That test was garbage," she spat. "Mom gave birth to me. I have her eyes. I have her chin." "Do you?" I asked softly. "Or is that just what she's told you for 40 years? Heidi stood up so abruptly her chair screeched against the floor. People turned to look. "You take the money, Tessa," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "You take the money and you disappear, or I swear to God I will bury you in legal fees until you're living in your car." She turned and stormed out, leaving the leather folder on the table. I watched her go. Then I reached into my purse and stopped the recording. Shudge. That afternoon, I met Aunt June in the parking lot of a medical plaza in West Knoxville. It was a nondescript brick building, mostly dentists and dermatologists. "Dr. Park agreed to see us on her lunch break," June said as we walked toward the entrance. "She's doing us a favor. Don't mention the recording." Dr. Ellen Park was a tiny woman with steel gray hair cut in a bob and eyes that didn't miss a thing. Her office was cluttered with photos of grandchildren. She hugged June, then turned to examine me. "You look like Caroline," she said, "especially around the mouth." "Thank you for seeing me," I said. "Sit, sit." She waved us into chairs. "June tells me you have questions about Greta Mueller." "I do," I said, "specifically about her medical history. I know you can't violate HIPAA, but—" Ellen waved a hand. "HIPAA applies to medical records. It doesn't apply to what a woman told an entire bridge club over gin and tonics in 1985. She leaned back in her chair. "Greta was dramatic," Ellen said. "She liked attention. When she was 24, before she met your father, before she even met her first husband, she decided she didn't want children. She said they would ruin her figure. She said she didn't want the burden." I stared at her. Greta, the woman who played the role of the doting sacrificial mother to perfection. "So she had a procedure," I asked. "A tubal ligation," Ellen said. "Voluntary. She bragged about finding a doctor who would do it on a single woman that young. She called it her insurance policy. My chest felt tight, so I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "Is it medically possible that she got pregnant 2 years later?" With Heidi? Ellen shook her head. Highly unlikely. Not impossible, failures happen, but with the method they used back then, 1 in 1,000. And here's the kicker. She leaned in closer. A few months before she gave birth to Heidi, I saw her at the grocery store. It was April, maybe May. She was supposed to be 7 or 8 months pregnant. She was wearing a big coat, but... Ellen shrugged. She moved like a dancer. She dropped her keys and bent straight over at the waist to pick them up. No hesitation. No baby bump getting in the way. I looked at June. June nodded grimly. "So where did Heidi come from?" I asked. That, Ellen said, is the million-dollar question. But I can tell you this. That baby didn't come out of Greta Mueller. I drove back to Nashville with the setting sun in my eyes. The pieces were swirling in my head, forming a picture that was darker than I had imagined. Greta hadn't just lied about an affair. She hadn't just lied about paternity. She had manufactured a child. Why? To trap a husband. David Cole was wealthy from what I could find online. A baby would lock him down. And then when that marriage failed, she brought the prop child to my father. Look at me, the struggling single mother. Look at my miracle baby. Save us, Ray. And he did. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It was a text from Dad. My heart jumped. He hadn't contacted me since the hospital. "Tessa, can't talk. Greta is in the shower. I know what you're looking for." I pulled over onto the shoulder of the highway, hazard lights blinking. I typed back, my fingers shaking. "What do you mean?" 3 dots danced on the screen. Then the box. In the garage. The one we made. Bluebird. I stared at the screen. The Bluebird box. When I was 8, right after they got married, Dad tried to bond with me. He took me out to the garage and taught me how to use a saw. We built a wooden box for my treasures. He showed me how to make a false bottom, a secret compartment to hide my diary key. He painted a bluebird on the lid because Mom loved them. I hadn't thought about that box in 20 years. "It's in there," he texted. "The paper. Get it." He meant the will. The 1989 will. He had hidden it in the one place Greta would never look, a piece of junk made by his daughter. He was helping me. He was too weak to stand up to them in the daylight, but in the dark, in the margins, he was fighting. "Thank you," I typed. "I love you." No reply. I merged back onto the highway. I had a mission. The will was in the house Greta controlled, the house Heidi was probably sleeping in right now to protect her mother. I needed to get in there. As I approached the city limits, another email pinged on my phone. It was from Greta. The subject line, "Family Dinner." "Tessa, please come over tomorrow night at 7. Let's put this behind us. Dad is home and wants to see you. We'll make your favorite lasagna. Let's heal." It was a trap. I knew it was a trap. They wanted to get me in the room, gang up on me, maybe force me to sign that NDA. But it was also an invitation. An open door. I looked at the phone. "I'll be there," I said out loud. I wasn't going for the lasagna. I was going for the Bluebird. The family house on West End Avenue looked like a fortress in the twilight. Every light was blazing, casting long, distorted shadows across the manicured lawn. The azaleas I had planted 5 years ago, my first landscaping project, were overgrown, choking the walkway. I parked my beat-up Honda Civic behind Heidi's gleaming white Range Rover. I checked my purse. Phone charged. Recording app ready. I took a breath that tasted of car exhaust and impending doom and walked up the steps. Greta opened the door before I could knock. She was wearing an apron over her silk blouse, her face flushed with the heat of the oven and performative hospitality. "Tessa," she beamed, opening her arms as if the last time we spoke she hadn't threatened to destroy me. "So glad you could make it." Come in, come in." I stepped into the foyer. It smelled of garlic and oregano, the same scent that used to make me feel safe. Now it just smelled like a lie. Heidi was in the living room pouring wine. She looked up, her eyes skimming over my outfit, jeans and a blazer with that familiar flicker of judgment. "Hey, Tess," she said breezily. "Red or white water," I said. "Suit yourself." And there was Dad. He was sitting in his favorite armchair by the fireplace, a blanket draped over his legs. He looked thinner than he had even 2 days ago at the hospital. His skin had a grayish cast like old newspaper, but when he saw me, his eyes lit up. "Princess," he whispered. I went to him, kneeling beside the chair. I took his hand. It felt frail, the bones prominent under the skin. "Hi, Dad." "I missed you," he said. I looked at Greta and Heidi. They were watching us, a tableau of a happy family. "Dinner is ready," Greta announced. "Ray, let me help you up." The dining room table was set with the good china, the stuff we only used for Thanksgiving. Mason Heidi's 12-year-old son was already seated glued to his iPad. He mumbled a hello without looking up. We ate in a tension that was thick enough to cut with a steak knife. Greta chattered about the weather, about the neighbors, about everything except the elephant sitting in the center of the table. Finally, as she served the lasagna, she cleared her throat. "Tessa," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We wanted to have you over because, well, things got heated at the hospital. We were all emotional." I kept cutting my lasagna. "Heated. That was one word for it." "We want to make things right," Greta continued. "Ray and I talked. We think it's best if we update the estate plan. To be fair." She looked at Ray. He was staring at his plate, pushing a piece of sausage around. "We're going to split everything 50-50, Greta said, smiling brightly. "You and Heidi. Sisters. Equal shares. Isn't that wonderful?" She waited for my applause. "And the 1989 will?" I asked quietly. Greta's smile faltered. "Oh, we'll just shred that. It's outdated anyway. We'll draft a new one next week. A fresh start. A way to erase the one document that gave me leverage." "That sounds generous," I said. "It is," Heidi chimed in, "considering." I looked at Dad. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. "Excuse me," I said, standing up. "I need to use the restroom." "Take your time," Greta said. "We'll save dessert for you." I walked down the hall past the guest bathroom. I kept walking. Into the kitchen. Through the mudroom. To the garage door. My heart hammered against my ribs. If Greta followed me. If Heidi checked. I opened the door and slipped into the cool darkness of the garage. It smelled of gasoline and sawdust. My childhood smell. I fumbled for the light switch. The fluorescent bulb flickered to life with a hum. The garage was cluttered with boxes, old bicycles, and gardening tools. But there on the workbench in the back sat the box. The Bluebird box. It was dusty, covered in cobwebs. But the blue paint was still bright. I ran my hand over the bird my 8-year-old self had painted. It looked more like a flying potato, but Dad had loved it. I lifted the lid. Inside were old treasures, a dried flower from a dance recital, a smooth rock from a creek, a photo of me and Mom. I felt around the bottom edge. There was a small notch. I pressed it. The false bottom popped up with a soft click. And there it was. A thick envelope yellowed with age. "Last will and testament of Raymond Brennan." My hands shook as I pulled it out. I opened the flap. "I, Raymond Brennan, being of sound mind, leave all my earthly possessions to my daughter, Tessa Caroline Brennan." Tears pricked my eyes. He had done it. He had kept it safe all these years. He had never signed the new ones. This was it. The smoking gun. I slipped the envelope under my blazer, tucking it into the waistband of my jeans. I closed the box, turned off the light. I walked back into the house, my heart soaring. I had it. I had the proof. I was going to win. I walked back into the dining room. Heidi was standing by the window talking to Mason. Greta was clearing the table. "Oh, good, you're back," Heidi said. She turned to me and her smile was gone. It was replaced by something sharper, something predatory. "Did you find what you were looking for?" I froze. "I don't know what you mean," I said. "Don't you?" Heidi walked over to the sideboard and picked up a file folder. "Because while you were gone, Mason told me something interesting. He said he saw Grandpa texting you last night, about a bluebird." I looked at Mason. He was still staring at his iPad, oblivious to the fact that he had just betrayed me. Heidi opened the folder. "We knew you wouldn't sign the NDA, Tessa. We knew you wouldn't take the money. You're too stubborn. So we prepared a backup plan." She pulled out a document. It looked official. Stamped. What is that? I asked, my hand instinctively going to the lump under my jacket. This, Heidi said, is a petition for emergency guardianship. The room seemed to tilt. We filed it this morning, she said calmly. We have statements from 2 doctors, friends of Mom's, attesting that Dad is suffering from dementia, that his heart condition has affected his brain, that he is easily manipulated. That's a lie, I said. Dad is fine. He's right here. I looked at Ray. He looked confused, frightened. What is she talking about? He asked Greta. It's for your own good. Ray. Greta soothed, patting his hand. You know you've been forgetful. Heidi stepped closer to me. The court hearing is in 30 days, but the temporary order goes into effect immediately. As of an hour ago, Mom is Dad's legal guardian. She makes his medical decisions. She controls his finances. And she controls who gets to see him. She smiled. A cold, victorious smile. And since you upset him so much at the hospital, Tessa, Mom has decided it's best if you don't visit for a while. No, I said. You can't do that. We just did, Heidi said. She pointed to the door. Now get out, or I'll call the police and have you removed for trespassing. I looked at Ray. He was trying to stand up, but Greta was holding him down, whispering in his ear. Dad, I shouted. Tessa, go, Ray choked out. Just go. I touched the will hidden against my skin. It was worthless. If they had guardianship, they could declare him incompetent. They could void the old will. They could write a new one and sign it for him. I had walked into a trap, and I had led them right to the only weapon I had. I backed away. I'm not done, I whispered. Heidi laughed. Oh, honey, you never even started. I drove to my apartment in a daze. I sat on my floor, the 1989 will spread out in front of me. It felt like a mockery now. My phone rang. It was Marcus. Tessa, he said, his voice urgent. I was just reviewing the filing they sent over, the guardianship petition. I know, I said dully. They told me. No, listen. I was digging into the supporting documents. They included Heidi's birth certificate as proof of the family unit. So I noticed something. The date of issue on the certificate isn't 1986. It's 1997. 1997? I frowned. That's 11 years later? Exactly. It's an amended certificate. The original was sealed. But there's a note in the clerk's log, a correction of the father's name. Correction from what? From David Cole, Marcus said, to unknown. I sat up straighter. Wait, you're saying David Cole wasn't on the original birth certificate, no? And here is the strange part. David Cole sued Greta for fraud in 1996, right after their divorce. The records are sealed, but the case index lists a paternity dispute. He proved Heidi wasn't his, I whispered. Yes. And if she wasn't his and Greta couldn't give birth? Then who is she, I asked. I think I found a lead, Marcus said. There was a name mentioned in the divorce deposition. A witness. A man named Eddie Vaughn. Who is Eddie Vaughn? He was a maintenance worker at the apartment complex where Greta lived in 1985, before she met David. I grabbed a pen. Where is he, Memphis? Marcus said. He lives in a trailer park off Highway 51. I looked at the clock. It was midnight. Send me the address, I said. Tessa, Marcus warned. If Heidi isn't Greta's biological child and she wasn't formally adopted, then she has no legal standing, I finished. She's a stranger. And if Greta falsified that birth certificate, Marcus let the sentence hang. That's a felony, I said. I hung up the phone. I looked at the will. I looked at the bluebird box Dad had texted me about. Heidi wanted a war. She just gave me the coordinates to the nuclear option. I grabbed my keys. Memphis was 3 hours away. I would be there by dawn. The air in the Davidson County Family Court smelled of floor wax and desperate people. I sat next to Marcus at the mahogany table, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles had turned white. Across the aisle, Heidi and Greta looked like a portrait of grieving dignity. Greta wore black, a tasteful string of pearls around her neck. Heidi was in charcoal gray, her notebook open pen poised, looking every inch the responsible daughter. Randall Mercer, their lawyer, was a man with a voice like oiled leather. He stood before Judge Holloway, gesturing toward where my father should have been. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "we are not here to cast aspersions. We are here to protect a vulnerable man. Mr. Brennan has suffered a significant cardiac event. His doctors agree that stress is a major risk factor for a second potentially fatal attack." He paused, turning to look at me. His gaze wasn't unkind, which made it worse. It was pitying. Unfortunately, the source of that stress is his daughter, Tessa Brennan. Her aggressive pursuit of estate matters while her father is in the ICU demonstrates a lack of judgment that borders on dangerous. "Objection," Marcus said, standing up. "Ms. Brennan is merely trying to uphold her father's established wishes." "Sustained, but move on," Judge Holloway said. She peered over her reading glasses. She looked tired. She had probably heard 10 versions of this story before lunch. Mercer called his witness. "Dr. Evans." I knew him. He was a cardiologist who played golf with Greta at the club. He walked to the stand, swore on the Bible, and sat down with the confidence of a man who billed $500 an hour. "In your professional opinion," Dr. Mercer asked, "is Raymond Brennan capable of making complex legal decisions right now?" Dr. Evans adjusted his tie. "Mr. Brennan is confused. His oxygen levels have been fluctuating. When I examined him yesterday, he was agitated. He kept asking about a bluebird. It is clear signs of delirium. He needs a guardian to make medical and financial decisions for him until he stabilizes." "And who is best suited for that role?" his wife Greta, Dr. Evans said promptly. "She has been his primary caregiver for 30 years. I looked at Greta. She dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. Judge Holloway made a note on her pad. She looked at Marcus. "Mr. Webb, unless you have evidence that Mrs. Brennan is unfit, the court is inclined to grant the temporary emergency guardianship. We need to ensure Mr. Brennan's safety." "We do. Your Honor," Marcus said, "we request 48 hours to present evidence regarding the applicant's suitability." The judge sighed. She looked at the clock. 48 hours, Mr. Webb. We reconvene Thursday morning." Heidi turned to look at me. She didn't smile. She just raised one perfectly arched eyebrow. It was a victory lap. I felt sick. If Greta got guardianship, she could bar me from the hospital permanently. She could isolate Ray until he signed whatever they put in front of him, or until he died. Marcus leaned in close to me. "You have 2 days, Tessa. Go find Eddie Vaughn." The GPS took me away from the manicured lawns of Belle Meade West toward Memphis and finally down a gravel road that kicked up clouds of red dust. The trailer park was a grid of rusted aluminum and fading siding. A dog barked relentlessly from behind a chain-link fence. The air smelled of charcoal smoke and stagnant water. I found Lot 42 at the end of the row. The trailer was beige with foil covering the windows. A wind chime made of old spoons clattered on the porch. I knocked on the metal door. "Go away," a voice shouted from inside. "No soliciting Mr. Vaughn," I called out. "My name is Tessa Brennan. I need to ask you about Greta Mueller." Silence. Then the sound of a deadbolt sliding back. The door creaked open. The man standing there looked like he had been carved out of driftwood. Deep lines etched his face and his gray hair was pulled back in a ponytail. He wore a stained undershirt and held a can of beer, though it was barely noon. "Greta?" he rasped. "I haven't heard that name in 40 years. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "You're not the cops." "No," I said. "I'm her stepdaughter, and I think she stole a child from you." He didn't slam the door. He just let out a long, wheezing laugh that turned into a cough. He stepped back and waved me in with the beer can. "It wasn't stealing honey," he said. "It was a transaction." The inside of the trailer was dark and smelled of old grease. I sat on the edge of a plaid sofa that had seen better decades. Eddie Vaughn sat in a recliner lighting a cigarette. "Tell me," I said. He took a drag, blowing the smoke toward the ceiling. 1985, he said. "I was working maintenance at the complex where Greta lived. She was a looker back then. Sharp, ambitious. We had a thing. Nothing serious. She made it clear I wasn't husband material. She was hunting for a big fish. David Cole, I said. Right. Mr. Moneybags. Eddie chuckled darkly. But Greta had a problem. She needed to trap him, and she couldn't get pregnant. Told me she had her tubes tied years ago because she hated kids. I nodded. The story checked out. So, where did Heidi come from? Eddie pointed the cigarette at me. I was seeing someone else too. A bartender named Lisa. Sweet girl, but a mess. Drugs mostly. Lisa got pregnant. It was mine. She wanted to get rid of it, but she waited too long. My stomach churned. I knew where this was going. Lisa had the baby in this trailer, Eddie said. A girl. Lisa was going to leave her at a fire station. She just wanted out. I didn't know what to do with the kid. I was broke. He took a sip of beer. I told Greta. Just venting, you know. And her eyes, they lit up. Like she just won the lottery. She told me she had told David she was pregnant to get him to propose, but she was running out of time. She needed a baby. He leaned forward. She gave Lisa $5,000 to disappear. She gave me $2,000 to sign a paper giving up my rights. She took the baby that night. Said she had a doctor friend who would forge the birth certificate, make it look like a home birth. Heidi, I whispered. She named her Heidi. Eddie said. She sent me pictures for a year just to prove she was taking care of her. Then she stopped. You sold her, I said. My voice was flat. I gave her a life. Eddie snapped. Look at me. Look at this place. You think Heidi would have been better off here? Greta gave her private schools and pony rides. I did that girl a favor. He stood up and walked to a drawer in the kitchen. He rummaged around and pulled out a stack of envelopes held together by a rubber band. He tossed them into my lap. Letters, he said. From Greta. From the first year. Talking about the arrangement. Talking about how much David loved his daughter. Proves everything. I looked down at the handwriting. It was Greta's. The looping script, the heavy pressure on the paper. Eddie, the money is in your account. Do not contact us again. She is mine now. I held the proof of a 40-year-old crime in my hands. Heidi wasn't just a prop. She was merchandise. My phone rang, shattering the moment. It was Marcus. Tessa, get back here. Now. What happened? It's Ray, Marcus said. His voice was tight. He had another heart attack, a big one. They're moving him to the main ICU. They don't know if he's going to make it through the night. The drive back to Nashville was a blur of tears and speedometer warnings. I made it to Vanderbilt in 2 hours and 40 minutes. I ran through the lobby, ignoring the receptionist calling after me. I slammed into the elevator button. The numbers ticked up agonizingly slow. 4th floor, cardiac ICU. I sprinted down the hallway. I saw them. Greta and Heidi stood outside room 402, a wall of black and gray. Greta saw me coming. She stepped in front of the door, crossing her arms. No, she said. I tried to push past her. Get out of my way. He's my father. He's my husband, Greta hissed. And I say who goes in. You upset him. You caused this. You are not going near him. Security. Heidi yelled. 2 uniformed guards turned the corner. They looked big. They looked bored. I pressed my hands against the glass of the ICU room. Inside, Ray lay motionless. He was intubated now, a plastic tube taped to his mouth. Machines beeped and wheezed around him, breathing for him, pumping his blood. He looked gray. He looked gone. Dad! I screamed against the glass. Dad! I'm here! One of the guards grabbed my arm. Ma'am, you need to step back. Let me go. I fought against his grip. I have to see him. Mrs. Brennan, the guard asked Greta. Do you want her removed? Greta looked at me. Her eyes were dry. Remove her, she said coldly. She is trespassing. The guards dragged me back. My heels skidded on the linoleum. I watched Greta turn her back on me. I watched Heidi smooth her skirt, looking at me with a mixture of pity and triumph. I have proof, I screamed at them. I know where she came from. Greta, I know about Eddie. Greta stiffened. She didn't turn around, but Heidi did. She looked at me, confusion flickering across her face. Who is Eddie? She mouthed. The guards pushed me through the double doors of the waiting room. Don't come back, ma'am, the older guard said. Or we'll have to call the police. I stood alone in the hallway. I held the packet of letters against my chest. I had the truth. I had the weapon to destroy them. But my father was dying behind that glass, and I hadn't said goodbye. I slid down the wall until I hit the floor. I pulled my knees to my chest and buried my face in my hands. A nurse walked by. She paused, looking down at me. She was young, with kind eyes. She knelt beside me. "Are you Tessa?" she whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. "I was in there," she said softly, "before they intubated him." He woke up for a minute. I lifted my head. "Did he say anything?" "He was confused," she said. "He kept trying to pull off the mask. He said, tell Tessa the bluebird has the paper. And then he said, read the letter." The bluebird. I touched the waistband of my jeans where the will was still hidden. I had that. "But the letter he asked for, Caroline," the nurse said. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Aunt June. "Tessa," she said. Her voice sounded far away. "I found it. The letter Caroline wrote. You need to come home. You need to read this before you do anything else." "I can't," I choked out. "He's dying, June. That's why you have to read it," she said. The next morning, the sun rose over Nashville, indifferent to the fact that my world was ending. I hadn't slept. I had sat in my car in the hospital parking garage reading the letters Eddie gave me, and then driving to the courthouse as soon as the doors opened. I met Marcus in the lobby. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "How is he?" Marcus asked. "Still alive," I said. "But just barely." Marcus nodded. He took the packet of letters from me. "This is nuclear, Tessa. This proves the birth certificate is forged. It proves Greta has been lying to the court for 30 years. But it takes time to authenticate," I said. "We don't have time. Greta is going to get guardianship today. She'll pull the plug or she'll sign the assets over, and then it won't matter who Heidi's father is." Marcus opened his briefcase. "Then we use the other thing," he said. "The email." We walked into the courtroom. Judge Holloway was already on the bench. She looked impatient. "Mr. Webb," she said, "I hope you have something significant. Otherwise, I am signing this guardianship order. Mr. Brennan's condition has deteriorated. He needs a decision-maker." "We do, Your Honor," Marcus said. He walked to the bench and placed a single sheet of paper in front of her. "This is an email sent from the account of Heidi Brennan Cole to my office dated 8 days ago," he said. Mercer, the opposing lawyer, stood up. "Objection. Relevance goes to intent." "Your Honor," Marcus said. Judge Holloway picked up the paper. She adjusted her glasses. In this email, Marcus continued. "Mrs. Cole asks me to prepare a contest to Tessa Brennan's inheritance. She asks me to review DNA results to prove Tessa is not Ray Brennan's daughter." Heidi stood up. Her face was pale. "That's attorney-client privilege." "You are not his client," Mrs. Cole, Marcus said calmly. "You were inquiring about retaining me. And you sent this email before Mr. Brennan's heart attack." He turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the applicant claims she seeks guardianship solely to protect her father's health. Yet a week before his hospitalization, she was actively plotting to disinherit his other daughter. This demonstrates a conflict of interest. She is not motivated by his care. She is motivated by his capital." Judge Holloway read the email. She looked at the timestamp. She looked at Heidi, who was gripping the table so hard her knuckles were white. "Mrs. Cole," the judge asked, "did you send this?" Heidi opened her mouth. She looked at Greta. Greta was staring straight ahead, her face a mask of stone. I was just asking questions," Heidi stammered. The judge set the paper down. "This court has serious concerns about the petitioner's motives," she said. "The application for emergency guardianship is denied." I let out a breath. "However," Judge Holloway continued, "Mr. Brennan still needs a proxy. I am appointing an independent court-ordered guardian ad litem to make medical decisions until a full hearing can be held. Neither Mrs. Brennan nor Mrs. Brennan will have control." It wasn't a total victory. But it blocked Greta. "Court is adjourned," the judge said. I turned to look at Heidi. She was staring at me with pure hatred. "You think you won?" she whispered as I passed her. "He's still dying, and you're still the girl who wasn't wanted." I stopped. I reached into my bag and pulled out a copy of one of Eddie's letters. Just a copy. I slid it across the table toward her. "Ask your mother about Memphis Heidi. Ask her about the trailer park. Ask her how much she paid for you." Heidi frowned. She looked down at the paper. I walked out of the courtroom. I had stopped them. I had the will. I had the truth. But as I walked into the bright, blinding sunlight, I felt hollow. Ray was still behind that glass, and I still didn't know if he loved me enough to stay. My apartment was dark when I finally got home. The adrenaline that had carried me through the courthouse had evaporated, leaving behind a residue of bitter ash. I sat on the floor, leaning against the cold brick wall. My victory lay scattered around me. The court order denying guardianship, the 1989 will, the letters from Eddie Vaughn proving Heidi was purchased, not born. I had won. Legally, tactically, I had demolished them. But my phone was silent. The hospital hadn't called. Dad was still a gray shape behind a glass wall, kept alive by machines that cared more about his oxygen levels than his soul. I picked up the will. To my daughter, Tessa. Why did it feel like a consolation prize? Why did this piece of paper, which promised me a house worth $2 million, feel as heavy as a stone? Because I didn't want the house. I realized it with a sudden, sharp clarity. I didn't want the money. I didn't even want to destroy Heidi, not really. I wanted him to wake up. I wanted him to look at me and say, "You are mine," without needing a lawyer to verify it. My phone buzzed on the floorboards, startling me. I snatched it up. "Aunt June." "Tessa," she said. Her voice was urgent. "Are you sitting down? I'm on the floor, June." "I'm outside," she said. "Open the door." I scrambled up and unlocked the deadbolt. June stood in the hallway, clutching her oversized purse like a shield. She looked exhausted, her gray hair escaping its bun, but her eyes were fierce. She walked in and didn't wait for pleasantries. She sat on my sofa and pulled a small yellowed envelope from her bag. It smelled of lavender. My mother's scent. "Ray kept this," June said. "He hid it in his desk. I found it when I was helping clean out his study years ago when Greta was redecorating. I stole it, Tessa. I'm not sorry." She handed it to me. The handwriting on the front was shaky, the ink faded to sepia. "For Ray. Open when I'm gone." My hands trembled as I took it. "Read it," June whispered. I sat down next to her. I slid my finger under the flap. The paper was brittle. "My dearest Ray. The doctors tell me I'm doing better, but I feel the cold in my chest tonight. If you are reading this, it means I lost the fight. I'm sorry, my love. I'm so sorry to leave you alone. But you aren't alone. You have Tessa, our beautiful, wild, stubborn Tessa. She has your chin, Ray, but she has my heart. She feels everything too deeply. She will need you to be her anchor." I choked back a sob. "I worry about you, Ray. You are so kind, but you hate conflict. You let people walk over you to keep the peace. Don't do that with her. Don't let anyone make her feel small. She is going to be small enough without a mother. I see the way that nurse looks at you. Greta. She brings you coffee. She touches your arm. I'm not blind, Ray. If I go, you will be lonely. You might look for comfort. That's okay. I want you to be happy. But promise me this. Promise me that whoever comes into your life knows that Tessa is the center of it. Don't let anyone push her to the margins. She doesn't need an inheritance. She doesn't need a big house. She just needs to know she was loved. She needs to know she was enough. Tell her I loved her. Tell her she is my greatest work. And Ray, be brave for her. Love, Caroline. I lowered the letter. The tears came then hot and fast. I cried for the mother I barely remembered. I cried for the father who had failed her final request. Be brave for her. He hadn't been brave. He had been a coward. He had let Greta push me to the margins. He had let Heidi take my place because it was easier than fighting. But then I looked at the date on the letter. October 12th, 1993. And I looked at the will on the floor. 1989. And the bluebird box. He hadn't been brave out loud, but he had kept the letter. He had kept the will. He had kept the box. He had preserved the evidence of his love in the dark where Greta couldn't touch it. He was a weak man, but he loved me. I wiped my face. The emptiness in my chest began to fill with something else. Not anger, not triumph. Clarity. I didn't need to win the estate. I didn't need to prove Heidi was a fraud to make myself real. My mother had already told me who I was. My greatest work. I stood up. Where are you going? June asked. To the hospital, I said. They won't let you in, Tessa. Greta has the guards. I don't care, I said. I'm going to see my father. Oh. I drove to Vanderbilt with the windows down, letting the night air dry the tears on my face. I felt light. For the first time in 30 years, I wasn't fighting for a scrap of attention. I was fighting for a goodbye. I walked into the lobby. The same security guard was at the desk. He stood up when he saw me, his hand going to his belt. Miss Brennan, he said. I told you I'm not here to cause a scene, I said calmly. I'm here to see my father, and I have a court order. I didn't, not really. I had a motion for a guardian ad litem, which meant Greta wasn't in charge anymore. It was a gray area. But I walked with the confidence of someone who owned the building. The guard hesitated. He looked at my face. He saw something there that made him pause. 5 minutes, he said. If you make a sound, I'm dragging you out. Thank you. I took the elevator up. The hallway was quiet. The lights were dimmed for the night shift. Greta wasn't there. Heidi wasn't there. They had gone home to sleep secure in their belief that the doors were locked against me. I walked into room 402. The only sound was the rhythmic whoosh click of the ventilator. Ray lay in the bed, his hands still at his sides. I pulled a chair up to the bed. I sat down and took his hand. It was warm. Hi, Dad, I whispered. He didn't move. I read your letter, I said. Mom's letter. His eyelids fluttered. Just a tremor. She told you to be brave, Dad. And you tried. I know you tried. You kept the will. You texted me about the box. That was brave. I squeezed his hand. I forgive you, I said. The words hung in the air, more powerful than any legal document. I forgive you for not stopping them. I forgive you for being scared. You don't have to protect me anymore, Dad. I can protect myself. I know who I am. A tear leaked from his closed eye. I reached into my bag and pulled out the letter. I folded it and tucked it into his hand, closing his fingers around it. She loved you, I whispered. And I love you. You can go if you need to. It's okay. The heart monitor sped up. Beep, 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 his eyes opened. They were glassy, unfocused, but they roamed the room until they found me. He tried to speak around the tube. He made a choking sound. Shh, I said. Don't talk. He moved his hand, the one holding the letter. He tapped my fingers. Once. Twice. Then he looked toward the door. His eyes widened. He was trying to tell me something. I turned around. Heidi was standing in the doorway. She looked wrecked. Her hair was messy, her eyes red-rimmed. She wasn't wearing her power suit. She was wearing sweatpants and a stained t-shirt. She looked like a tired, middle-aged woman. She held a piece of paper in her hand, the copy of the letter I had given her. Is it true? She asked. Her voice was a broken whisper. I looked at her. I saw the enemy who had tormented me for decades. But I also saw the girl who had just found out she was bought for $2,000 in a trailer park. Yes, I said. Heidi slumped against the doorframe. She looked at Ray. Did he know? She asked. Ray made a sound. He nodded. A small jerky movement. Heidi covered her mouth. He knew. You all knew. I'm the only one who didn't know. She looked at me. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you destroy me when you had the chance? I looked at the letter in Dad's hand. Don't let anyone make her feel small. Because you're a victim too. Heidi, I said. Greta lied to both of us. She stole my father, and she stole your identity. Heidi began to cry. Not the fake manipulative tears she used for effect. These were ugly, wrenching sobs. She slid down to the floor, curling into a ball. I looked at Ray. He was watching her. There was no anger in his eyes, only sadness. I stood up. I walked over to Heidi and knelt beside her. I didn't hug her, we weren't there yet, maybe we never would be. But I put a hand on her shoulder. Get up, I said. He wants to see you. She looked up at me, mascara running down her cheeks. Why? Because he's your father, I said. Maybe not by blood, but he's the one who raised you. And right now he's the only parent you have who isn't a liar. Heidi wiped her face. She stood up on shaky legs. She walked to the other side of the bed. She took Ray's other hand. Daddy, she whispered. Ray looked at her. Then he looked at me. He squeezed both our hands. The monitor steadied. The rhythm slowed, becoming stronger. Beep, beep, beep. The nurse walked in. She checked the monitors. She looked at Ray, then at us. He's stabilizing, she said, sounding surprised. His vitals are coming up. She looked at me and smiled. Whatever you said to him, keep saying it. I looked at Heidi. She was holding Ray's hand like it was a lifeline. For the first time in our lives, we weren't fighting over him. We were sharing him. I sat back down. We're not going anywhere, Dad, I said. We're right here. And for the first time in 30 years, I believed it. 3 days later, Ray was extubated. I was there when they pulled the tube out. He coughed, a racking, painful sound that made my own chest ache, and then he took a breath. A real breath. His voice was a rasp, barely audible over the hum of the ICU. Water, he croaked. I held the straw to his lips. He drank greedily. Then he looked at me. Where is she? He asked. Greta, I asked. He nodded. She's in the waiting room, I said, with the lawyers. Ray closed his eyes for a moment. Then he opened them. They were clear. The fog of the sedatives and the years of passivity had lifted. Bring her in, he said. And Heidi? And Marcus? Dad, are you sure? I asked. You're still weak. I'm done being weak, Tessa. Bring them in. The room felt small with everyone inside. Greta stood by the window clutching her purse. She looked perfect as always, hair sprayed into submission, lipstick applied with surgical precision. But her hands were shaking. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Heidi stood at the foot of the bed. She looked stripped down. No makeup, no jewelry. She looked like a ghost haunting her own life. Marcus stood by the door, a notepad in his hand. The silent witness. Ray adjusted the bed so he was sitting up. He looked at Greta. Did you love me? He asked. The question hung in the air, simple and devastating. Greta blinked. Of course I love you, Ray. I've taken care of you for 30 years. Did you love me? He interrupted, his voice stronger. Or did you just need a place to put the baby you bought? The room went dead silent. The only sound was the air conditioner kicking on. Greta's face went white. Who told you that? She spun toward me. You poison everything. It wasn't Tessa, Ray said. I knew. Greta froze. I knew in '96, Ray said. When David Cole sued you. I saw the court papers, Greta. I saw the paternity test. I saw the deposition from Eddie Vaughn. Heidi let out a small, strangled sound. Greta stared at him. Her mouth opened and closed. You knew and you stayed. I stayed because of Heidi, Ray said. He looked at Heidi, his eyes softening. She was 10 years old. She called me Daddy. What was I supposed to do? Throw her out? Send her back to a trailer park? He looked back at Greta. I stayed because I thought you were a desperate woman who made a mistake. I thought if I gave you a home, if I gave you security, you would stop lying, but you never stopped. You lied about the will. You lied about Tessa. You tried to erase my daughter. I did it for us. Greta screamed. Her composure shattered like dropped glass. I did it to keep this family together. You think I wanted a bastard child? I couldn't have my own. I was broken. So I fixed it. I fixed everything. She pointed at me. And she was always there. Caroline's ghost. You looked at her and you saw her. I had to protect Heidi. I had to make sure she had a future. By stealing mine? I asked quietly. Greta sneered. You can take care of yourself. Heidi needs help. She's not strong like you. I looked at Heidi. She was trembling. Is that what you think of me, Mom? Heidi asked. That I'm weak? That I'm a charity case? Greta faltered. Heidi, honey, I didn't mean... Heidi walked over to her. She stood toe-to-toe with the woman who had raised her. You lied to me my whole life, Heidi said. You told me I was your miracle. You told me I was special. I wasn't special. I was inventory. Heidi, stop. Heidi turned to Ray. Daddy, she said, her voice breaking. Did you love me? Or did you just pity me? Ray reached out his hand. Come here. Heidi hesitated, then walked to the side of the bed. Ray took her hand. I changed your diapers, Ray said. I taught you to ride a bike. I walked you down the aisle. DNA doesn't make a father, Heidi. Being there does. I love you. You are my daughter. Heidi put her head on his chest and wept. Ray looked at Marcus. Mr. Webb, he said. Do you have the paperwork? Marcus stepped forward. I have the draft based on our discussion this morning. Ray looked at Greta. You have your own money, Greta, he said. The settlement from David Cole, the investments I set up for you. You will be fine, but you are not getting this estate, and you are not staying in my house. Greta gasped. You can't kick me out. Watch me, Ray said. He looked at me. Tessa, he said. The house is yours. It was your mother's dream. It belongs to you. I nodded. I couldn't speak. And the rest of the estate, Ray continued. 60% to Tessa, 40% to Heidi. He squeezed Heidi's hand. Because she is my daughter too, and she is going to need a fresh start. Heidi looked up. You're leaving me something. After everything I did. You were scared, Ray said. And you were manipulated. I don't punish victims, Heidi. He looked at me. Is that okay, Tessa? I looked at Heidi. I looked at the woman who had tried to destroy me. And I saw the scared little girl who just wanted to belong. It's okay, Dad, I said. It's fair. Marcus handed Ray a pen. Ray signed the document with a shaky hand. It is done, he said. He looked at Greta. Get out, he said. Greta looked around the room. She looked for an ally. She found none. She straightened her spine, pulled her purse tight against her side, and walked out the door without looking back. The silence she left behind was heavy, but clean. 2 months later. I stood on the porch of the house on West End Avenue. It looked different. The overgrown azaleas were trimmed. The shutters were painted a soft sage green. The for sale sign in the yard was gone. I wasn't selling it. I was living in it. A car pulled into the driveway. A sensible sedan. Heidi got out. She looked different too. She had cut her hair into a short, chic bob. She was wearing jeans and a t-shirt. She looked younger, lighter. She walked up the steps holding a box. Here, she said. I found these in Mom's. In Greta's storage unit. I thought you should have them. I opened the box. It was full of old VHS tapes. Tessa's 5th birthday. Christmas, 1990. Thank you, I said. How is she? I asked. She's in Florida, Heidi said. Living in a condo in Boca. She sends me emails. I haven't replied yet. How are you? Heidi shrugged. I'm okay. I'm closing the store. It was never really my dream anyway. I'm thinking about, I don't know, going back to school. Maybe psychology. She laughed. God knows I have enough material. I smiled. You'd be good at it. Heidi looked at the house. Dad is doing well, she said. He likes the rehab center. He says the nurses are nice, but bossy. He needs bossy, I said. Heidi looked at me. Her eyes were serious. Tessa, she said. I'm sorry. For everything. For the test. For the hate. I was so jealous of you. You knew who you were. I felt like a fraud my whole life even before I knew I was one. I reached out and took her hand. You're not a fraud, Heidi. You're a survivor. She squeezed my hand. Then she let go. I should go, she said. I have a meeting with Eddie Vaughn. He wants to have coffee. I think I want to know him. Good luck, I said. She walked back to her car. She didn't look back, but she waved as she drove away. I walked into the house. The foyer was bright. I had taken down the heavy drapes. The sun poured in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I walked into the living room. Ray was there sitting in his wheelchair by the window watching the birds at the feeder. Aunt June was on the sofa knitting a scarf that looked dangerously long. Hey, I said. Ray turned. He smiled. The left side of his face still drooped a little, but his eyes were bright. Hey, princess, he said. "Who was that, Heidi?" I said. "She brought some old tapes." "That's nice," he said. "That's nice." I walked over to the mantel. There were 3 photos there now. One was of Caroline laughing in the wind, her hair a halo of gold. One was of me in my graduation gown standing alone but looking strong. And the third one was new. It was taken last week in the hospital garden. Me, Ray, and Heidi. We weren't smiling perfectly. The sun was in our eyes. My hair was messy. Ray looked frail. But we were touching. My hand on Ray's shoulder. Ray's hand on Heidi's arm. We looked real. I picked up the bluebird box from the mantel. I opened it. The will was gone. Marcus had filed it. The letters from Eddie were gone. I had burned them. But Caroline's letter was still there. "Tell her she is my greatest work." I closed the box. I put it back on the shelf. I looked at my father and my aunt and the sun-drenched room. I didn't need the letter anymore. I didn't need the will. I walked over to the window and stood next to my father. "Look," he said, pointing. "A bluebird." I looked. A flash of bright blue cut through the green of the garden. It landed on the fence, sang a short, sweet song, and then took flight, soaring up into the endless open sky. I watched it go until it was just a speck against the blue. "I'm here, Dad," I said. "I know," he said. "I know." And for the first time in my life, I knew he wasn't going anywhere either. 1 year later. The living room on West End Avenue was crowded, but it wasn't a party. It was a Tuesday night workshop. I stood by the fireplace watching the room fill up. There were folding chairs set up in rows. A plate of June's cookies sat on the sideboard next to a stack of brochures. Marcus Webb stood at the front of the room adjusting a projector. He looked less like a corporate shark and more like a weary but satisfied teacher. "Welcome, everyone," he said, his voice carrying easily over the low murmur of conversation. "Tonight we are going to talk about something uncomfortable. We are going to talk about the things you don't say at the dinner table. We are going to talk about protecting the people you love even when it's complicated." I scanned the faces in the audience, mostly women, some older clutching handbags like life preservers, some younger looking angry and tired. They were the second wives, the stepdaughters, the disinherited, the invisible. My eyes landed on a woman in the back row. She couldn't have been more than 25. She was wearing a waitress uniform and she was crying silently, trying to hide it behind a pamphlet. I walked over to her. I crouched down so I was at eye level. "Hi," I whispered. "I'm Tessa." She looked at me, startled. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I shouldn't be here," she stammered. "I don't have an estate. I don't have anything. My dad, he remarried. His new wife says I'm not welcome in the house anymore. He's sick and she won't let me see him." The familiar ache tightened my chest. It was a different face, different details, but the same story. "You are exactly where you need to be," I said. The front door opened. Heidi walked in. She was carrying a tray of coffee cups. She saw me kneeling by the girl. She saw the girl's tear-streaked face. She didn't hesitate. She put the tray down on a side table and walked over. Heidi sat in the empty chair next to the girl. "My name is Heidi," she said softly. My mother tried to erase my sister, and I let her because I was scared. The girl looked at Heidi, then at me. Sister Heidi smiled. It was a small, genuine smile. It didn't reach her eyes fully. There was still sadness there, but it was real. "It's a long story," Heidi said. "But here is the headline: Silence doesn't buy you safety. It just buys you time until the explosion." Marcus cleared his throat at the front of the room. "A will is not about death," he said, looking around the room. "It is a love letter. It is the final way you tell your family, I see you, you matter, and I will not let anyone take that away from you." He pulled up a slide. It showed a photo of a simple wooden box. The bluebird box. This, Marcus said, saved a family. Not because of what was inside it, but because of the intent behind it. Raymond Brennan couldn't fight his wife in the open, but he made sure he fought for his daughter in the permanent record. I looked at the girl next to me. "What's your name?" I asked. "Sarah," she whispered. "Sarah," I said, "does your father know how you feel?" She shook her head. "I don't want to upset him. I don't want to cause trouble." I took her hand. It was cold, just like mine had been in that hospital hallway. Cause trouble, Sarah. Ask the hard questions. Ask to see the papers. Because the only thing worse than an uncomfortable conversation is a conversation you can never have because it's too late. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a business card. It wasn't for my landscape architecture firm. It was for the nonprofit Marcus Heidi, and I had started 6 months ago. The Bluebird Project, legal advocacy for blended families. Give this to your dad, I said. Tell him Marcus will come to him. We make house calls, even to hospitals. Sarah took the card. She looked at it like it was a lifeline. Thank you, she breathed. I stood up and walked to the back of the room. Ray was there in his wheelchair. He was frailer now, but he insisted on coming to every meeting. He said it was his penance. I rested my hand on his shoulder. He reached up and patted it. Look at them, Tessa, he whispered, watching the room full of people listening to Marcus. All those secrets, all that pain. And now they have a map, I said. Heidi joined us. She stood on Ray's other side. That girl Sarah, Heidi said quietly. She reminds me of you. She reminds me of you too, I said. Scared she's going to lose her place. Heidi leaned her head on my shoulder. Just for a second. We're going to help her, Heidi said. I looked out at the room. This was the legacy. Not the money. Not the house on West End Avenue. It was this. It was taking the wreckage of our family and building a lighthouse for someone else. Marcus finished his presentation. Don't wait, he said to the room. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until the anger passes. Do it now. Write it down. Say it out loud, because the truth is the only thing that survives. The room broke into applause. It wasn't polite applause. It was the sound of relief. I walked to the microphone. My name is Tessa Brennan, I said to the crowd, and a year ago I found an envelope in my diploma tube that destroyed my life. I paused. I looked at Ray. I looked at Heidi. And then we built a new one. I leaned into the mic. We all have an envelope, I said. We all have a secret we're scared to open or a conversation we're scared to start. Maybe it's a paternity question. Maybe it's a will. Maybe it's just telling your stepmother no. I looked directly at the people in the front row. I looked through them, imagining the thousands of women listening to this story in their cars, in their kitchens, in the quiet moments before sleep. What is your envelope, I asked. What are you hiding to keep a peace that is already broken? Open it. I promise you the truth is better than the silence. And you don't have to do it alone.